Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Akotrosio Sandra. Today we are going to be studying about the secondary sources of information as promised in the previous videos. So today we are going to explore the world of secondary sources of information which provide an insight and interpretation of the primary sources. And these secondary sources, they help us to make sense of the original data, identify patterns, and gain new insights. So let's examine the role of secondary sources in research and critical thinking. So as we are going to see in this presentation that is presented in form of slides, to get an insight of what we are talking about, the secondary sources of information. Once again, I'm Akotrosio Sandra, and we are going to mainly talking about the different content or the different basics about the secondary sources of information, and we try comparing them with the primary sources so that we get the best we can be using in our everyday life. So secondary sources of information, they help us to analyze, interpret, and summarize the primary sources. They are created after an event by individuals who did not experience it firsthand. They also help provide context, background, and analysis of the primary data. So the characteristics include indirect or second-hand accounts, as we tried describing when we're talking about the definition. They also often are being created by experts or researchers, and they also summarize multiple primary sources. So when we're dealing with secondary sources of information, we realize that most citations are from the primary sources. So go to the different examples of primary sources of information. So examples include the books, textbooks. So these provide explanations of various subjects. So you realize that in these books and textbooks, we have those citations from the different primary sources or from the individuals that were at the point when the different events were happening. So we have the review articles and meta-analysis. These summarize and analyze multiple studies. We also have the biographies. These interpret the lives of historical figures using various sources. We also have the encyclopedias and dictionaries. These provide summarized factual information. Then the news reports and documentaries. Realize that in news, the different people who deal with news go get the news in the very time the event is happening. So they help analyze past event using the primary sources of information. So after looking at those different importances, so the different importances include provide context, that is, so they explain historical and scientific events in details. They also summarize information, helping readers understand complex data. They also offer expert analysis, since they rely on primary sources that are first-hand. So they offer expert analysis. And they present conclusions from multiple primary sources. They also support learning and research, hence making information accessible to students, journalists, and researchers. So those are the different importances of the secondary sources of information. So here we're going to be comparing the different primary and secondary sources of information. So here on our left, we have the primary sources. On the right, we have the secondary sources. So primary sources, okay, we are differentiating them mainly according to the characteristics, functions, and the examples. So we have here primary sources are original first-hand records. Then secondary sources are interpretations, summaries, or analyses of primary sources. So secondary sources mainly lean on or are dependent on the primary sources. So primary sources include diaries, research, report, and photographs. And secondary sources include textbooks, biographies, review articles. So primary sources also provide direct evidence or raw data, while the secondary sources provide analysis, interpretation, or context. Primary sources are created during the event or by direct participants. Then the secondary sources are created later on by those who were not directly involved at the place when the event was taking place. So the primary sources of information used for first-hand insight and factual accuracy. Then the secondary sources are used to understand broader perspectives and interpretations of information. So in conclusion, realize that secondary sources of information play a vital role in helping us understand and interpret primary data. By analyzing and synthesizing information from the secondary sources, we can identify the trends, develop new perspectives, and construct meaningful narratives. And also remember, secondary sources are essential tools for critical thinking, research, and informed decision making. Thanks for joining me in this exploration of the secondary sources. And please, according to the different basics we have studied, we should be able to differentiate the primary and the secondary sources and be able to choose which one is reliable in the different activities we shall be taking, different activities that shall be taking place in our daily lives. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel as we wait for the next exploration of a different idea based on the different activities that happen in our society. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.